Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Helen.
And this is the Squiggly Careers podcast. Every week we talk about a different topic to do with work and share ideas, tools and actions to help you, and it always helps us, to navigate our squiggly careers with that bit more confidence and clarity.
And today is a special episode because it is our year in review episode, which is mainly for our most frequent listeners. If this is the first episode you are listening to, I'm not sure it's going to be the most useful, but it's insightful into...
I think the questions are going to be useful.
That's true. We're going to ask each other a series of questions, some quickfire questions to reflect on the year, and then some slightly sort of deeper ones to get some insight from what we've done and what we might do differently next year. So the questions are useful. Our answers might be irrelevant. But if you are a long-time listener, you might find it interesting to hear a little bit about our journey in running our business Amazing If and working together as friends and business partners and all the things that go with that. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay,
Let's
so we've got 5 quick fire questions. I feel like I'm a bit more in control today because I've got them written down.
She has the iPad.
So we've got 5 quick fire questions and then we've got 3 slightly more thoughtful reflections. So maybe I'll ask you yours and I'll do mine. So we'll do back and forth.
Yeah,
all right.
let's do
Okay.
it.
So the first question, quick fire question.
And we don't know what we're going to say, so we don't share these with each other beforehand.
Yeah, well, I know what I'm going to say, but I don't know what you're going to say. Yeah, okay. I've done some
We
preparation.
know half of it.
Yeah, because these questions, I think, actually, just a side note, if you are going to do these questions, I think putting people on the spot with them, I think you want to give people these questions in advance of a conversation just so they can think about it a bit. So, okay.
And so you don't have recency bias. Because you do need to reflect. You're reflecting on your whole year. You're not reflecting on what happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it's so easy to get distracted by that.
And we will get onto the questions, but I was going through, I did a LinkedIn post. I do sort of like memorable moments from the year where I go through my phone, 9,000 photos from 20, I know.
Oh God.
No, I was like, I looked at like in my phone, I was like 2024, it's like 9,000 photos, that's a lot to scroll through. And then I tried to pick one photo from each quarter that was a real memorable moment for me. And that was actually quite a good prep for today because it just reminded me of certain things that had happened that I'm not sure were top of mind when I was answering these questions first time around. You ready?
Yep.
Okay, so your year in a word.
Gritty.
Ooh.
What's your year in a word?
Grit.
Yeah, sure.
Yay! Okay.
Turns out we spent quite a lot of time together.
Okay, go on then. Why was it gritty? You went gritty, I went grit.
Yes. I think gritty because I was like, it wasn't like the whole year needed lots of grit, but I thought there were particular moments in every quarter of the year where together, actually, we had to be very gritty to get through them. Either because it was a challenge that we'd not anticipated, we were trying to finish something, and we're both more starters than we are finishers, so it wasn't necessarily always something had gone wrong, or that we were just finding something hard and it's difficult, which can be, I think that's a good thing. It challenges you, but often then that's where you need to be at your grittiest to kind of make progress. So when I think about when we were gritty, the actual examples, the situations and scenarios are quite varied, but it was sort of the same skill that I felt like we had to keep drawing on to sort of find our way through those moments. And I always feel really proud of them as well. So I don't think grit is a bad thing. I don't look at all of those moments and think, oh, that was because something was wrong necessarily. Sometimes it was, but it's kind of what do you need to do in those moments? Like, you need to be gritty. Why do you say grit?
Well,
same reasons or different?
Before I had grit, I had the word push. And I was like, I thought you wouldn't like it.
Push?
Yeah, because
how do you describe your word of year? Push. What were you pushing?
Me.
Push Sarah, do some more work.
Well, at first, at times I felt we were pushing against each other a little bit when we were trying to create things.
Yeah.
We were trying to push things. I felt like actually it would have been easier not to do some of the stuff that we did, but we were like, no, like push on. And then I was like, push is just a rubbish year in a word, push. So I went with grit.
That was quite bleak.
I know, that's what I thought. So I was like, I can't have push, but I did have push, and then I scratched it out.
So basically grit was your nicer version.
Yes. And then, but you know why grit? Because I was going back to the definition of grit from Angela Duckworth is passion and perseverance for long-term meaningful goals. And I was like, well, that's why we pushed. Right?
Yeah.
Because we are passionate about what we're trying to achieve, and we recognise that what we're working on now is more than what's happening in this year. It's the longer term things. So I was like, no, it is grit, but at times
It felt
push.
or pushy.
Yeah, I was like, then I got into, was I being pushy? And I just scrapped it. But I've talked about it now anyway. So
Or at least we're consistent.
yes, that is. But let's see.
Let's
see how consistent we
It
are.
could be a bit boring if we're the same every time.
I
So
know,
let's hope we're not.
Gosh, can you imagine? Okay, what was your most memorable day of the year?
I did struggle with this to really like pick out
Have all the brilliant days with me blurred into
one.
just...
Yeah, definitely that. I did struggle to pick out one day where I was like, oh, it was definitely that day. I think when we do events, that always really sticks in my mind, because I think a lot of work goes into events, and then it's a very much kind of a moment in time where you get to, we've done some live podcasts this year. We've done some work with our learning partners when they've all been in a room, like learning together. And I think the reason those moments always stick out is because of the energy that's created. Mm-hmm. And energy is one of our values at our company. And I think it's a moment where you like feel all that like collective energy, which I really like. And I think it gives you a boost to continue doing what you're doing, because you're like, oh, what we're doing is kind of making a difference. And you feel that and you get to connect with people. So events, I just sort of went, all of the events we do, I kind of feel energy and I feel like it gives me energy. One other memorable moment I did have, though, was we were working on our book together, and I will always remember the moment where we changed our minds on how we were going to structure the book. So we had gone, I think it's fair to say, quite far down
I think we'd probably written 30,000 words or more by that point.
Yes.
Which is half a book.
Yeah. Let's not get specific because it's really depressing. But I really remember the moment where we'd sort of circled around a few times of like, oh, there could be a different way of doing this. I really remember standing up in that room, walking over to the flip chart and saying to you, if we did do this differently, let's just put on a flip chart. Let's get it out of our systems. Like, what would it look like? And we wrote it. And I was standing up, you were sitting down, which is usually how we sort of brainstorm. I'm meandering around and you're sort of kind of sitting back and looking at it. And then we both looked at it and we were like, that's better. And sort of that moment of realisation of what we had to let go of to get to something better. Yeah. We were like, this will be better because we do this. And it felt almost like simultaneously like tough and the right thing to do. I am really proud of us in that moment, because I don't think that's an easy thing to sort of accept and to kind of move on from. And I think we did do that. And we know now, because we've had enough people read it, that it was the right thing to do. But I think it's a brave thing to do. So it's not like that day was we didn't know that was going to happen that day. We just thought we were like iterating on what we'd already done. But we made a massive decision that's actually going to impact loads of the work that we do. I will always remember walking over to that flip chart.
Yeah, I remember it. I remember it very well and being like, oh.
What was yours?
Mine was an event, but it was the event that you weren't at.
Oh, thanks. Great.
It was amazing.
You say I'm mean?
No.
That event that you didn't come to?
No, it's because it was like a real, like a moment for me. So we launched this year Gremlins, which is a Book with Pound project, and we had a live podcast event where we had various people on the stage, like Daisy Buchanan, for example, all talking about confidence. And this was due to be like, a moment
to celebrate.
Like book writing's hard and it takes a while, and it was supposed to be like a, like
and
a
I
moment.
love that book.
Yeah, and I really kind of proud of the book and really enjoyed the process. And I think Sarah often leads things with books because you're just very good at sticking with them. So it's a real you thing as well. And then you couldn't be there because you were poorly. And I remember being on that stage and thinking, oh, I don't really want to do this without you. There was a real moment of me, like it was a really good event, and it was a really nice moment, and the conversations were really good, and there was a lot of support. So some of my friends knew how I felt, and they were in the audience, and they'd messaged me beforehand, and they were like, it'll be okay. So it was really kind. But equally, I was still on the stage thinking, I don't really want to do this without you. It's not So it was a real memorable moment, because not that I'd ever thought I did. Yeah. It wasn't like, up until this point, I thought
got my secret business plan.
But it was just like, it doesn't really mean a lot. It doesn't mean as much. We always talk about our most memorable moments are so much better when we're in them together. Yeah. And that was a moment that you just weren't part of, and it just felt wrong because of it. So our third question is about mistake moments. I might need your help with this one, because I'm pretty sure I've had quite a lot of mistake moments across the year. But
well, we know we have because we share them.
Yeah, I know. And I did search them and I was like, oh, but what's been... I feel like my biggest mistake moment is one that I could fix. Before the end of the year, I think I can fix this one. So my mistake moment is Sarah and I, all the work that we do with companies, when we're presenting, we live draw all of our like our sessions. We don't present with slides, we live draw everything. And we've used the same app for the last 10 years to do that. And my app's got a bit glitchy. And I think I need to experiment with some other tech. And I feel like my mistake moment is I haven't done that. I have not made time to proactively find a better option. So I feel like I am just, something is not as good as it could be, and I'm just sat with it, and it stresses me out every week. It stresses me out because I think, oh, it's going to go wrong, and so my mistake moment is there's something that I could be fixing, but I'm just sitting with it not being as good. That's where I got to. Is that a mistake moment?
No.
Okay, give me one.
But I think the reason I don't think what you're sort of describing though is almost a preemptive mistake moment, because you're going, I know that app might break, or
well,
it
does
a bit
break.
glitchy.
So I repeatedly have the same mistake. My other option,
that's sort of the prompt maybe, because when we talk about mistake moments, it does tend to be, you can really pinpoint, I made a mistake, I was late, or I got some information wrong, or I used the wrong data point. Whereas I think you're talking about being frustrated about, you can see how something can be better, and you just sort of not done anything about it.
But that mistake, I think my other option, another mistake, and this is a bit recency bias because it literally happened this morning, was yesterday I was doing something with someone on our team, and I wrote a whole document for them, and they said, oh, Helen, I've already written that document and sent it to you.
Oh, no.
And that is not the first time that has happened. So I think I'm noticing I'm making a few repeat mistakes. My tech has gone down a few times and I haven't fixed it.
Yeah,
I have done the work before. I've done what the team have done without checking with them first.
Yeah.
So I think my mistake moment is I've got some repeated flags of being like a bit inefficient. I don't know. That was my reflection when I was thinking about them all.
I was researching mistakes a little bit for the new book that we were writing, and the more you read about mistakes, the more you realise it is unsurprising to repeat mistakes, because our brains like patterns and they like familiarity. And so actually you're more likely to repeat the same mistake than you are to learn from a mistake. We always think, oh, well, you make a mistake, but it's okay because you'll learn from it. You're more likely to not learn, which is why we do mistake moments where across the company, every time you make a mistake, someone goes into Teams, and actually to all of the company we share, here's the mistake moment I had, but most importantly, here's what I learned, in an attempt to sort of break that pattern. Because what you might say there is, okay, you know, that second mistake where you're like, I do work that's been done before, that comes from taking initiative and probably acting fast.
Yeah.
And so actually maybe what it is like, before I do this, I sort of need to have almost like a press pause moment.
I feel like it's check first, act
check
fast,
first.
But I just act fast.
And it's just that tiny check
Yeah.
that would perhaps prevent that. And I think if you don't turn a mistake moment into an action that you can imagine taking, then nothing, like I definitely find exactly the same. I'm like, well, I've not taken an action.
Yeah.
If I've not done anything different, how can I expect a different outcome? Because I find that with my mistake moments, it is often, even if they're not identical, you can sometimes spot a theme.
What's yours then?
Well, I looked back over all the ones from this year in Teams, because I can go back and literally read them all. Mine are all small, but ones that felt, I was almost surprised that I made them. So if you just said to me, you were going to make this mistake, I'd be like, no, I won't make that mistake. So it's things like, we turned up to an event this year and I'd not got a bit of technology with me that we always need, always. So you're like, well, but Sarah, you know that.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I didn't remember that tech. I just moved house. And then I looked at another example and I was like, oh, I didn't have something else with me. I'd forgotten something and something else was going on in another part of my life. And so what I've started to spot is when you've got loads of capacity, obviously you're less likely to make a mistake. You remember what you need to remember. But then I'm like, but there's always other stuff going on. You know, there's always like something, right? There's something at your kid's school, or there's something with your family.
Yeah.
And this year, and I find it very surprising, I've got really into checklists. I read the checklist manifesto. And you know, when you're like,
unlike you.
I know it is, but it really is because it works. And so for things that are repeatable tasks, have a checklist, because essentially you are making something more foolproof. And a lot of it comes from like surgery, where they, like doctors will have checklists. And actually, even though they might have done the same surgery loads of times, they still found people still make mistakes.
Yeah.
Even like you might forget to, I don't know, wash your hands or something. So I felt better because I was like, oh, okay, maybe I don't feel quite so bad about myself that I made these mistakes. But actually there is an easy fix that you can put in place And we've just started to use them across the team, and I do open them and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go through the checklist. Have I got this bit of tech, this, that, this, that?
I'm not checklisted up. I feel like, where do you think a checklist would help me in my life?
Going to an event, running a workshop, doing a podcast recording so you don't forget your mic. Like, like all of those sorts of things.
I feel like they're not my issues.
Yeah, but if they're not but if it's not your mistakes, if you're like, well, I don't have those mistakes, you're like, you perhaps don't need the checklist. You might need other things.
Yeah.
I clearly do, because I'm like, well, I can see
the patterns,
and I can then see. I'm like, again, well, I've got to do something different, and I don't think I'm naturally, like I say, obviously I forget them because I can sort of see it like written down. That's why I like writing down mistake moments, because it makes them data rather than just feeling bad.
Do you know what? I feel like you might have lost your wallet less this year. Is that fair?
I don't ever lose my wallet.
You used to lose your cards all the time. Do you remember?
No.
You did?
No.
Yeah, you would always be like, can't find my cards, can't find my...
So my argument is, there's a difference between not being able to find something and losing something.
No, that is
I don't ever lose them permanently.
Okay, sure. I feel like you have misplaced your cards less this year.
That might be true.
Yeah. Fourth question.
Yeah.
What is a skill that you've got better at over the last 12 months?
I found this the easiest of the questions.
Okay.
I think it is receiving feedback specifically from you.
Oh.
Because when we've gone through the process of writing a book, and because of the way that we've written our latest book, I've received more feedback, I think, than I've ever received before. And some of that is, it's hard to hear feedback, or it's feedback where you are maybe starting again some of the time. There's quite a lot of sunk costs in the writing process generally. And sometimes, you have to take a deep breath, or you feel certain emotions and you sort of have to like ride out those emotions and then sort of come together and be sort of very pragmatic and practical, and also be really open. So occasionally, you write something and you think, you're like, I think this is good, or I think this works really well, and you don't, right? And so you can sort of argue about it in an unhelpful way, or you can constructively try and be really open, try and listen. You definitely have to kind of put any ego, I think, you have to one side, albeit writing is in some ways, it is quite an ego-driven thing, because you're writing those words. And I felt really proud at times that I felt like I at least tried, you'll be able to tell me how it felt from the other side. I tried to be really like accepting and open and constructive. And at times that was really difficult. But I was also mindful of I tried to sort of deal with that in my own way, so then it didn't sort of get in the way of us making progress. Because I think if I'd have the challenge sometimes with you and I working together is, not only are we writing together, we are running a business together, we are very good friends together. And sometimes I'd be like, I sort of want to talk to a friend. And I was like, but you're my friend. And I was like, I need new friends.
That's feedback.
Yeah. But when you're like, our worlds sometimes are so blurred. Like you and I had it a few times this year where you're like, right, everything merges and molds together in such a way. And I think during that process, I was just sort of very focused on being like, how do we keep moving this book forward in a way that's really pragmatic and just keep our readers in mind? But it wasn't always easy. And I do think I've got better at that now, partly through practice, right? You do need, if you just said, I just want to get better at it in a vacuum, you probably won't. But I think there was a bit of a forcing function. And because it wasn't really easy, it wasn't like we just wrote everything and went, oh yeah, it's all brilliant. It was quite a different process to writing Gremlins, where really we were talking about things that we already knew worked, and there was less kind of newness that we needed to create there. So that was my skill.
Well, I think that I don't really love giving difficult feedback. It's not something I really enjoy doing. And I think I gave what probably felt like difficult feedback that didn't feel difficult. So I think I can't say, I think you're so much better at this than you were 12 months ago. I can say I think we've had a lot of it this year, and it definitely has felt hard at times, but I have never found it hard to talk to you. You've always been receptive and open, and I can see the breath. I can see it, like literally like a, okay, let's go again. I can literally see it, but there's always a, let's go again. There's not a, right, I'm coming to battle you on this point thing. Yeah. Mine is, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think I've got better at this.
Yeah, go
the
on.
Skill of saying no. I think I'm saying no more. I think I've got my own little vocabulary, which we've talked about before. I think I have a way of doing it. But I definitely think I'm saying no to more things, to certain opportunities that we've had. I'm like, I don't think that's the right thing for us right now. I feel like I'm getting a bit better at saying no. and not feeling bad about it, which is the second part of saying no. I think
Yeah.
you've got to say no and actually like own your no. Reflections?
I suppose I don't see it, but then I don't think I would.
Okay.
You know, like I'm not seeing those no's most of the time. I wouldn't imagine, because you're dealing with it directly.
Yeah.
So it's not that visible for me. I guess other people in our team might see it more. You've talked to me about one thing that you're going to say no to next year,
Already said no.
which surprised me. And I was like, oh,
But
Helen's
also,
gonna
we
say
had
no
quite a
to
big
that.
opportunity that we said no to recently. And I think
Yes.
I was quite like,
Yeah.
was kind of holding the no on that one a little bit.
Yeah, and I think probably for me as well, it's hard to be really kind of balanced around that, because sometimes I suppose the conversations we have are where you've not said no and then you're really feeling it. So I think I feel those moments where you've got really crunchy times and I'm like, wow, it's because you've said yes to so much. I think I see the spikiness that creates for you, and you're like, I'm going from one thing to the next, and I've got an evening thing and I've got another evening thing. I think just because of our relationship, that is more visible to me than the no's, which doesn't mean I don't believe you. I just don't think
You should see the no's in my inbox.
Yeah, there you go.
I said there's many like, not right, not now type thing.
That's good.
The last one is, what do we appreciate about each other? Oh, over the year, what have you appreciated? What have you appreciated about me this year?
I always feel like you want me to be happy.
I do.
Yeah, I know. I do. And so I think you care about what does it take and what does it look like for Sarah to enjoy the work that she does, do the work that she's best at, and then you will always think, how can I make that happen? How can I be helpful? How can I give you the space to do that, even if it's not the same for you, which actually often it isn't the same for both of us. We definitely have some things in common, but I always feel that support from you to kind of be like, well, if I then said something different to what you already know about me, I just always know that your first response is definitely like, right, okay, well, what do we need to do, and how could we think about this differently? If I said to you, I want to work, this is not true, I want to work 1 day a week, I don't think you'd be like, oh no, you'd be like, right, okay, well, let's talk about that.
I think I'd do the breath that you do with feedback. I'd be like, okay,
1 day a week.
Yeah, let's find a way.
But you would find a way.
Yeah.
That's a very Helen phrase. You're like, let's find a way. I do think it's quite unusual to have someone else who you're working with who is so invested in like your version of success.
Yeah.
And that feels really nice, because that feels like we can have very different conversations. And you're very non-judgmental. Like, because I know sometimes things that would matter to me like wouldn't matter to you, and also vice versa. I feel like you're never going, well, I don't get why that's important, Sarah, why that would matter. I just ask, how can I help, or how can I support? And I think that is uniquely you. And it's not just in the last year, but I do always feel it.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you.
You might want to hug me. I'm like,
I know, I'm not going to
hug
hug her. She's got a cold. I'm not going now.
Yeah.
Mine, what I appreciate you, is I've put like challenger.
Quite different to what I've just said.
No, such a challenge. No, but I feel like you are always challenging us to be better. Like the book, like how could it be better? You don't, if something can be better, you won't let it go. You will challenge us to improve the quality of our learning. Where I'll be like, okay, I think it's good enough. You're like, no, you will always challenge us. Or how can we be more relevant? Or how can we improve what we're doing? Or how can we like do this better for the team? It is just, even when we're busy, like this year, we've had so much on. We've had the business and we've had like the book. There's been so much on, and you don't let that go. Like you always keep that bar of like, well, how could we be better? How could we make that sentence better? Like it goes from like strategy to sentences. like the challenge. You apply it to like so much of what you do, and I think it's just very different to me, and I'm very grateful for it, because I think we are all better. What we produce is better. The team is better. Like I am better because you have this sort of relentless, but we could do that better. We could make that different. We shouldn't just accept it because that's what we've done. And I think I really appreciate it because it's not what I bring. And so I really value that you've always got that.
Yeah, I think it's just, these things, sometimes probably the things you appreciate the most are often, like part of your DNA. Like I don't feel like I choose that. I just feel like that is the way that my brain works, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. Just like I think your brain works in a way where you're like, you wouldn't question me, you would find a way with me. I think that's just sometimes our defaults are also what makes us really good. And it is nice for people to say what they appreciate about you. It's a good team exercise to do.
Team exercise
It's
is nice. So let's move into 3 reflective questions. Maybe not so quick, maybe a bit more.
We weren't that quick, were we? Let's be honest.
Quick. Just like,
we were luxuriating in the end of year podcast, aren't we?
Nice?
Isn't
it nice to luxuriate on the year though? You know when you're like so, like you go through stuff so fast all the time. Actually, it's quite nice to just spend like 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, like luxuriating in what you spent a year of your life doing. Okay, so let's luxuriate some more. When do you think you have had the most positive impact this year? I've gone with 2, which I've gone with.
The question should
I've
be,
got a long
haven't
list.
I?
Yeah, I've got a long list. So I got a 2. Maybe you can decide for me. Maybe that's part of it. Like you should decide when I've had the most positive impact. So I put 2 down. I think there are certain client programs that I have run, and I'm not sure if I can name them, but there are a couple of big client programs that I've run that I feel like I've made a really big difference to the company and the people in the companies, almost like at a cultural level. I feel really proud of that. That's had a big impact for those individuals and actually for us in terms of our relationships with those clients. I'm proud of that. And then I think we've had a couple of campaigns, like things like the sprint in summer. I feel like one of the differences that I'm quite good at a campaign. Like you're really good at a long-term commitment, like a book. I'm quite good at a short-term project, and I feel like I have a positive impact on. We had 1 million minutes of learning that people did in our sprint this year because of what we created, and I go, well, that's 1 million minutes of learning that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't created the sprint. So those are mine.
Oh, I don't think I can choose. I feel like they were both brilliant.
That one of those was rubbish, Helen. You can't bank that one.
No, I could definitely choose. And actually, mine was different. Mine was our Squiggle and Stay programme, which. The positive impact is a small slice belongs to me, but lots of the positive impact of that programme belongs to you and the partners that we worked with, because really they were the ones doing the experiments. So the idea with that project is that people signed up to new ways to support people to kind of move around their organisations. And I think the positive impact that I specifically had, this is almost like a good practice for an interview question, isn't it? Like, how did you contribute to that big project? Was almost at the start with the ideas. So we created like an ideas bank for the companies. I think it had 16 different ideas in. And it was like, you could try career safaris, you could try move mentoring. And the reason I think we have a positive impact in that moment is we are good at both coming up with ideas, and that's a strength that I've got, but also describing them in a way that's memorable, kind of labelling the learning, giving them a name, giving them a bit of an identity. And I think we were sort of a catalyst for those organisations to then say, well, you change them or you adapt them or iterate, make sure they work in your context. But I feel like if we weren't that catalyst, those organisations and then all their employees who then benefited from those experiments, kind of that wouldn't have happened. A bit like the 1 million minutes wouldn't have happened if we hadn't done that. I kind of go, loads of people wouldn't have had the opportunity to Squiggle and Stay if we kind of hadn't created that programme. And like I say, I feel like we were the catalyst, and then loads of the hard work was done by the organisations we worked with, like Specsavers and Welsh Water and Dunks Bank. And I remember thinking, like, this is amazing what they're all going away and doing. And then I'm really proud that we've then published all the results of that and all the data openly so that anyone can access it. And that feels very consistent with why we run Amazing AF and kind of what we are trying to do around career development, like making it available to everybody. And so I think I'm taking a small slice of credit for something that actually I feel just really proud of everyone who was involved in that.
Well, if that was an interview, I'd give you the job.
Thanks, thank you.
The job. You've got a job to Squiggly Career co-founder. I'll let you.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, I'm laughing at this one because you don't know my answer to this one. Who have you been learning from this year? Who's going first?
Go, then you go, because you've got me intrigued now.
Oh, no, I haven't told you. You're going to be like, what is this? Okay, so I have been part... What?
It's going to be some sort of weird YouTube thing.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
It's not. You're going to think this is really weird. Flippin', who I've not told you about.
Right.
Okay. So I am part of a network called EY Winning Women, and I go to various events with this group and meet lots of different people. And I recently went away with them to a conference called the Strategic Growth Forum, where you got to pick some people to meet. And one of the people that I wanted to meet was Flippin', who...
I mean, what a name.
I know, exactly. But he also runs like a learning organisation over in the US, particularly focused on education. And so, oh my God, I haven't told you this. So I went to meet Flippin'. I don't know how old Flip is. I think Flip might be about 80.
Right, okay.
Or 70, 80.
Lots of wisdom there.
Lots of wisdom. And I sat down with Flip and his CEO, And there was something, Flip is a psychotherapist by training.
Ooh.
And he sort of brings, you sat at the table, it's round table, and you sit there and he like looks into your soul. I started crying. Honestly.
How have you not told me this?
Because I've not caught up with you about the Strategic Growth Forum.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
So basically, it was a really interesting conversation.
I mean, this is like the sound bath thing all over again. You coming out of something crying and me going, what is happening?
And me hugging the therapist.
Yeah.
That was the most amazing experience I've ever had in my life.
Oh.
When you hit the bong. No, he didn't.
Did nothing for me.
He didn't
sure.
have a bong. But we did sit at a table and he was asking some questions. I was asking Flip about like how's he scaled his business and how does he use technology and all this kind of stuff. And then he was just asking me these really deep questions about like what motivates you to do what you do.
And you started crying?
Well, because he kept going further and further. It was like he was looking into my soul. He was like, but why, Helen? What is the meaning for you in your work? What drives you to make a difference to people's development? And I was like, I don't know. I just want to help people, Flip.
Oh my God.
Anyway, I learned quite a lot from him because he was just very sincere and very warm. And I think, sometimes you think someone has to tell you something to learn from them. But I think I just learned that sometimes just asking questions is enough. Like when you're being mentored, I think you're like, oh, the value in this conversation is the wisdom I'm going to get from Sarah. I'm not sure Flip imparted any wisdom on me, but what he did do was ask me some questions that made me think a bit more deeply about what I'm doing and why I do it, where my motivation comes from, and connected. And because he was like literally looking at me, and we were in this massive conference, so many people, busy, noisy, but he just looked at me and asked me the questions and waited for my answer. And I think it's I don't know, I think I was a bit overwhelmed and I was a bit tired. I think there were other reasons I cried. And it wasn't like an outpouring, it was just and then he went back, he said to me, there was a bit of emotion there, Helen. Can we go back to that? And I was like, can we not? Can we move?
I'd love to have been a fly on the wall for that part. But maybe there's something there about, sort of asking and attention. So he was both asking you really good questions and then really paying attention. Because if he noticed a bit of emotion, but also
just when
being
your
very
eyes
present.
just get a little bit glassy. And I was I was trying to forget that. So anyway, that was a conversation.
Well, there you go. There's new news for me.
New news you didn't know. Who have you learned from this year?
I actually thought about this slightly differently because I think in lots of ways, I've spent quite a lot of time by myself this year. By necessity, it sounds really bleak, doesn't it? But when you are writing a book and you don't do it very often, so this is lots of words. Books are real team efforts, but there is part of the book writing process that is a very solo endeavour. It can be quite lonely at times. But I did feel like one of the things that I really enjoy about writing a book is the process of learning from lots of people that actually you haven't met. So I think my ratio of non-fiction book reading when I'm writing a book goes up tenfold. If I look at how many books I've now got versus how many books I had at the start of writing our latest book, I've probably got 50 new books. And sometimes that's because I wanted to read a chapter. Sometimes it could be as small as a paragraph. Sometimes it was the whole book. And so I feel like I've spent time with lots of kind of new people. And at least some of those people, I think I'd like to get in touch with and see if they'd like to come on the podcast, for example, for like expert interviews. So I was like, well, I've definitely learnt from those people, whether that's about pausing or perfectionism or being a beginner or whether that's giving. And sometimes those books as well kind of take you outside of your world. Like they're not about careers or they're not about learning, but they have written something connected or that somehow is interesting to kind of what we're writing about. So I was like, they're probably the people I've learnt the most from. But I've also learned, I don't know whether I've learnt from, but I've really needed two of my friends this year, Rachel and Rob, who I will give a shout out to. I feel like they have been by my side through that writing process in a way that you can't do because you're in the writing process and you need to critique it and we need to kind of edit it together. I would just leave them voice notes, kind of saying hello and sort of describing where I was and kind of, they always knew like what chapter I was working on. And I'd be in the same place doing very similar walks every day. And I'd be like, oh, I'm on the being a beginner chapter and I've got to the end of that, or I've come up with a good idea here, or I've got a bit stuck. Rachel's got her little baby Joni. And so I'm very grateful she's on maternity leave.
You could leave her these voice notes.
I said to her, I'm going to need like some sort of transition plan. When she goes back to work, I'm going to need some sort of like, how do I get weaned off? Like her giving me all this. So I've sort of been I think sometimes you're very good friends, and they're sort of two of my best friends. They know what you need when you need it.
Yes.
And they've like really shown up for me and been incredibly supportive. And I sort of can't imagine having done it without the two of them. And Rob's also read, he's the only person actually other than our editor who's read the whole book. He gave us some really helpful insights as we were going. And you know, when you just need just those, I don't need loads of people, but I do need a couple of people who I feel like are on my side, they're sort of with me and they are willing you to succeed. And they would probably hear sometimes if I got a bit stuck, or if I was doubting myself, and they'd try and like, I don't know, at least encourage me or remind me, you've done it before, you can do it again. And so, yeah, I suppose it did make me reflect a little bit on the continued importance of having the right people around you, because you never quite know when you'll need them. If you had said to me that was going to be as important as it has been this year, I don't think I would have guessed that, but I don't think I would have got through the year with that grit without them.
Very nice. Okay, last question.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
What do you want to be true in 12 months' time that is not true today?
I would like us to have spent more time creating together in a room by this time next year.
Oh, I would like that too, and I didn't write it, but I would like that too.
Shame. I mean, don't feel bad about it, but you know.
I want that too. I've really missed that this year.
Yeah.
I kind of think like the foundation of everything was time like that together, and we just haven't had that time. And
I think all of our best stuff, when I think about everything we've done that's really good, that makes a difference to Squiggly, increases our impact, and even when we have done the book stuff together this year, all of our big breakthroughs on the book were together and typically in a room together. Me pacing in circles,
on the
you
beach,
sitting down watching me pace, walking down a beach together. I mean, we ditched some of that stuff, but we still made some. You've got to get to that breakthrough to get to the next breakthrough. And even if I think back, you know, whether it's like TED Talks or podcasts or those kind of things, it's always in those moments where our brains are sort of fizzing and merging and different in all sorts of good ways. And that's where I'm like, we're better because we are a team. And yeah, for lots of reasons this year, I think we have to take accountability for that. We didn't prioritise it, and we did some of the things that I think we're both really proud of. But I'm like, I wouldn't want to be sitting here this time next year and not having spent that time together.
Agreed.
I'm like forcing you into it now.
No,
I'm like,
I love it. No.
I'm like, I don't want to spend more time
I really
together.
want to. No, mine is different. So by this time next year, I would like there to be 10,000 lobsters ready to learn. I want because our new book, Learn Like a Lobster, is coming out in just over a year.
Yes.
So by this time next year, I want there to be like a level of excitement. I want there to be 10,000 people who are like, I am in. I'm
ready to learn like a lobster.
I'm ready to learn like a lobster. I'm ready to advocate for this new way of approaching. I want there to be like excitement, you know, obviously, because I do.
And we can't talk about the book loads, but I feel like if we're going to say the title, we should explain that lobsters never stop growing. And there's lots to love about the lobster. They never stop growing. They fuel their own growth. They're very self-sufficient. They sort of create their own growth. And then they sort of grow through these quite hard moments. And that gives you a bit of a hint. It's a bit of a teaser for kind of what's to come. It will make sense, the fact that we are talking about lobsters and learning. We promise.
With 10,000 people will
be
bought into it by this time next year, and they'll be making
whether they
it
like it or not is the way that you described it.
Lobsters are go, lobsters are growing, and lobsters are learning. That's the plan.
So if you would like to do a year in review, I think you can do it by yourself. I think you can do it with a friend. You can do it in a team. You could do it with your manager. Have a look at the pod sheet, because we'll put the questions that we've talked through today on there, so you can refer back to those. We have also got a few other resources. We've got articles, we've got frameworks that you can look at. So please make the most of those. They're all free and ready and waiting for you.
Thank you so much for listening to us and to our journey over the last 12 months. It has been a brilliant year of learning with the Squiggly Career community, so thank you for being part of that. And we'll be back with you next year.
So here's to some squiggling in 2025.